I'm just going to do a quick hello so you can see my face, and so you can see. Yeah, can you hear me now? Is everything clear? I'm going to disconnect the web because huge bandwidth is just going to speak and everyone will be great. Okay, so hello from India, from very, very far away from where most of us are. And I live on a little farm where we grow chickus. It's a bit like the kiwi fruit for all the people from Australia, but it's different. It's a poor man's fruit. It's a little village about 2.5 hours away from Mumbai called Dahanu. And Dahanu is the larger region, and we work in a village. Yes, and we work in a village called Sogwe. The closest to the chiku fruit is the kiwi, so I suggested kiwi since there's such a heavy Australian and New Zealand dominance in Moodle. So yeah, so we're 2 hours away from the city of Mumbai. It's a completely rural area with an indigenous population, and we've been trying a lot of things with open source technology. We run a school here and with kids. This is the first time that we are participating in something like this, and I'm both a bit nervous and excited to be sharing, but really happy to be here. The presentations seem to be amazing. There's a lot that we can learn from. Right at the beginning, I'd like to state that it's really disappointing that most developing countries like us are very far off in debates, discussions, or any discourses on education and technology. We find it really difficult to find people who work in open source here, whether it's software or hardware. And most of the time, we rely on the community like you and the internet to set up our servers, to do everything. India, and I have only 2 other colleagues from India participating in iMoot, and I'm not sure they'd agree. But India is a country where the education system is a huge problem. And children grow up with a divide between the hands and the head. So what you do with your hands is considered lower than what you do with your head, and therefore people become consumers of knowledge, consumers of things rather than producers of it. So on that note, I'd like to start the presentation. As you can see from the first slide, we are talking about first generation learners, and just to give you an idea. So this is a community called the Warlis. You can see that lovely painting there. This is an indigenous forest dwelling community of scheduled tribes. As per the Constitution of India, these communities are marginalized. They have special privileges and reservations, what you call in your language. And they have reservations in education, in jobs, and so on and so forth. However, historically, they have, you call them the aboriginals, but so historically they've lived in forest. Now the modern world has come and reached to their villages. But the education system, the modern facilities, the health is really, really very poor. The indicators of literacy can be as low as 25% for women and 30 to 40% for men. Children generally drop out of school by class 7, though the Indian government has made a lot of effort to bring access of education to the villages, the quality is a huge problem. So basically, we're talking about a community that is marginalized. They are all under the poverty line in India. We have a poverty line. A lot of things have been said, both favorable and unfavorable, about this so-called line, but they are all living under the poverty line in small hamlets spread across several villages in the region of Dahanu. In terms of work, the parents of the children we work with are informal sector workers, which means they could be agricultural labor, they could work on brick kilns, they could work on little boats, they may have shops, and many of them have their own land and farm. This is very critical because for food security and things like that, in a poor country like India, farming is still a very important occupation. So most of the people that we work with, the parents of the children that we work with, would be informal sector workers with very, very low incomes, and all categorized as below poverty line. Is everyone there? Am I clear enough? Okay. Okay, great. I'm in a bit of a delivery mode because I think I have some things to say, and we can have the discussion later. Yeah. Hi, Stephen. Hi. Okay. So just again to give you a little bit of a very, very brief and superficial overview. Education in India is the responsibility of the state, of the government, and predominantly most children in this country go to the public education system. However, more often than not, it is in the local language of the state. So for instance, I live in Maharashtra, so the local public education and the schooling would be in Marathi and not in English. Unfortunately, the curriculum is very, very theoretical, has no applicability, is really out of context for the child, and is full of rote learning. Teachers are still beating children in India, whether you like it or not. There's a lot of hierarchy. So the indigenous community of children, as we call them, the tribals, would be isolated in the school or would be treated badly. They would not be treated equitably. If you come from a lower caste or you come from you are an indigenous person in this country, you are looked down upon. And basically, the education system is exclusive. It's in this backdrop that we set up the school. So just to give you a little example, I grew up in the city of Mumbai and opted out of the city life to come and farm in a little village in India. And with my partner Hemant, who's the open source technology guy and who does all the open source work for us here. And we decided to set up our school predominantly after we had our own two young little girls who are now 4 and 6. And we live in the community, so we thought, why don't we offer and open an English medium school for the local kids in which our kids could also go. So we started in 2010. We offered English in an area where very little English is spoken of. All the children are first generation learners, and by first generation learners, we mean that the parents of these children would have done probably something like grade 5, grade 4, or never been to school at all. Some of the parents may have reached grade 10. The parents themselves feel or think that their children would probably go only up to class 10. So this is the backdrop. And we started in 2010 with the kindergarten with 3 years. And we decided that we'd grow 1 year up every year. So we are now at class 5. 85% of the children are from this community called the Varlis, who do the painting that I showed you. They are all indigenous tribal people, and they're all first generation learners. So yeah, that's the backdrop in which we are working. We decided that, well, all the regular education systems around us, especially the government schooling, is really, not bringing out anything constructive for the child. Neither does the student gain any skills, nor does he get a job, nor does he learn any concepts. So we decided to be an unconventional and different school. We decided to operate out of a common sense. What we thought makes sense to us as adults, we should teach our children rather than have heavy curriculum prescribed by the government, which is irrelevant. So we decided not to have any textbooks. There is no rote learning, which for a school in India is a pretty big thing. Many of you from Western countries may not understand how the education system really works in developing countries like ours, but no rote learning is a big thing here. We also decided that the school is an example and an attempt at building equity and a community development work. So we need to ensure that the tribal children are equal. We need to ensure that they have access to as much as they could, and so on and so forth. So when we started, we basically had a little shed. We had 6 children. We moved to 30 children the first year, and we are now at 170 children. And we decided that retaining the tribal child, ensuring that he goes up to class 10 in an atmosphere that he's happy and enjoys, is more important than really just getting him to pass exams. So we do fun things. The school is located on a farm, so children work on land, they farm, they grow vegetables. We use a lot of drama, we use a lot of activity-based learning, we use clay, we use games. Children are running around the campus looking for things. Children are experimenting with soil, if we're doing a topic on soil. And we started developing our own curriculum slowly, which was dependent on human beings, which was of course dependent on surfing the internet and so on. But we didn't have any system in place. One of the biggest challenges to running a school like this is that you do not get human resources in the sense you do not get teachers. You do not get teachers who speak English. So you're running English school. You want children to learn and speak English because new knowledge today is being built in English. Science, computers, the internet, everything is in English. But you do not get a human resource base that has the exposure to this culture and that can actually speak English. So one of the biggest challenges we have even today is that we do not find teachers who speak English. The other thing we found is that we really need to encourage an individualized, self-motivated pace of learning for each child. So if there are 150 children, we actually need to have 150 learning plans. Again, whatever we saw around us in terms of the textbooks available, the curriculum that the other schools were practicing, we realized that we need an interdisciplinary approach. I mean, which all sounds very commonsensical to everyone. But when you run a school and you look at a science textbook and then you look at a geography textbook and you look at what's happening in the city of Mumbai and IB schools, and you wonder what's going wrong. So we needed something that was interdisciplinary, that looked at life from all angles possible, not purely mathematical or science, but look at life holistically. We also realized that we need better tools, and we realized that we need to repeat and reinforce things done in school because there is absolutely no support for the child at home. The child is living in an environment where he lives in a mud hut, where his family goes to work most of the time in the day, and when he or she comes back home, they would eat their food and go to sleep, and next day the parents would go to work and the child would come to school. But absolutely, it's a great place in terms of living on land and having a village and so on and so forth, but there's actually no exposure or access to the medium of English, to computers, to the modern world, to even the city of Mumbai. So we decided that somehow this school needs to bring the world to the Warli child somehow, and that would be a school that we would enjoy. Over and above that, other than all these lovely ideas that we had and all these thinking that we wanted to do, basically the other truth is that just to step back a bit, we also come from a social justice background. Tamarind Tree, that runs the school, is a not-for-profit organization that works on environmental protection, works on campaigning, and so on and so forth. And we also do a lot of community media work. And if you look around, where I'm sitting in a village right now and I'm talking to you all over, you're in New Zealand, you're in Germany, and so on and so forth. And 500 meters from where I live, the village is what we are calling a media dark region. They have no access to internet. The smartphone has arrived here, but the 3G data costs are too expensive, and children and communities are just being denied access to information and knowledge. So we thought that the school can become a demonstration and can become a pilot experiment in gaining access and reappropriating knowledge and reappropriating technology for communities. And therefore, we sort of landed up on technology. That photograph that you see there is a typical classroom in the school. We'll talk about that later, but this is where we've reached in 2014. So given that we had these ideas and we had this philosophy, now it comes to what do we do and how do we take the school forward? You don't get teachers, you have poor bandwidth, you have all these ideas. We come from an open source background. My partner Hemant runs an organization called Nomad, where he builds a DIY FM transmitter and dabbles in a lot of open source softwares. And basically, it was his vision and his pushing that we adopted open source technology right from the start. We started off with simple things like using TuxPaint and gCompri and all the bundles available with Ubuntu, and we realized that children with no access, who have never touched a laptop in their lives, just simply love the feel of the digital world. They are so motivated to come to school. The minute they come to school in the morning, they want to know where the laptop is and what they're going to do, whether it's TuxPaint or it's a TuxMath or a typing or a gCompri program. Coming from that philosophy and understanding, slowly watching what's happening in the world, we realize that the open source world can offer whatever we want. All the values and ideas that we stand for can be fulfilled in this school through the open source world. We believe that knowledge should not be owned and controlled. We believe that knowledge needs to go to the communities. And slowly with all these ideas and the access to the internet, we began experimenting with technology. As I said, we initially simply started with a few laptops and loading them with bundles like gCompri and TuxPaint and so on. But we realized that there is so much more that we could do. We realized that even if the tribal child has no access at home, if we were to set up courses that the child could access, it would simply be fantastic. Frankly, but there was a lot of resistance from the teachers. Teachers are digital natives. I don't know if that's the correct word. They've digitized themselves after coming into our space. They've learned English after coming into our space. So the entire space of the teachers, the children, including us, everyone is learning. So we always consider Tamarind Tree School as a space for everyone to learn. Children learn at their level, teachers learn at their level, and people like us who are the founders are also learning new things at our level. So one of the biggest challenges we had when we decided to set up Moodle is that if a 6-year-old tribal child has to access his or her course, how does he or she do that? Because his level of English in terms of both speaking, reading and writing is only being developed. You must understand that the challenge for us for English is much, much, much higher and very different from what you would be doing in your Moodle courses. We cannot have courses that have heavy text stuff in them. We cannot have courses that simply give instructions, because even our 9-year-old child would not be reading and understanding the amount of English that a child from your country would. However, having said that, given that the entire team was not very efficient at graphics and animation and creating all these logos or creating flash presentations, for instance, we decided we'd see what best we could do. And we started developing some courses, and we spent about a year and a half really fearful of Moodle and really fearful of moving away from the traditional space into a technology space. Other than it was predominantly Hemant and me who had to really push the team to figure out that, look, this is what we need to do. So in March, in about 6 months or 8 months back, we finally launched our virtual learning environment. We call it a blended learning environment. Some of the teachers are capable of developing courses, most of them aren't. So we are constantly looking for people all over the world who could develop content for us. However, we strongly believe that content needs to be contextual. We don't want to just pick and cut and paste videos from YouTube or cut and paste information somewhere. That's really not the kind of Moodle we want. So we are sort of struggling with those ideas. I'd like to make this important point, and maybe if anyone would like to stop me, I have no problem. Moodle for us is a sociological project and not a technological one. This is really very, very important for me to communicate all the way from India to you. We're using Moodle, our space at the school and education, as a way to change the society, as a way to show the rest of the schools in Dahanu, for instance, that what technology can do for our children, as a way to look at what is happening to children in India and why are they being denied. Somewhere at the end of the day, people look at us and think that we're crazy. They think that how can a child, 7-year-old child, be on the computer the whole day? People in India still think this. On the other hand, we have the parents of the children who are totally blank, who have never seen a laptop, who come and actually give us 20 to 25,000 rupees. That's what a laptop costs, and tell me that, can you buy a laptop for my child and load it with whatever you want, and can you figure it out, because we don't know how to buy the laptop, but we have the money. So, as I said, and I'd like to repeat, Moodle for us is a sociological project. Parents are understanding the value. They have no access or exposure to the world that you have, that you and me have. But many of them are actually coming and saying that we understand that this is what our kid needs to know today. We understand that this is where the world is going. So today we have from 170 children, we have 5 children who have bought their own laptops. We keep encouraging parent-teacher meetings. We actually have sessions where we tell parents that how much money did you spend on weddings and alcohol, because a lot of tribal people still spend a lot of money on weddings, more than they earn. And we tell them that instead of spending money on the wedding, you need to buy your child a laptop, and whenever you're ready, you should. And many of them are coming forward and asking us to, give them schemes where we can, they can pay 5,000 rupees a month, and so on and so forth. So we are not. We really want people to buy into the idea, even though it's a community that may not understand what they're doing, but there is a buy-in. We don't provide laptops to children at home free. We have about 20 to 25 laptops on our campus. We have struggled and bought through a lot of donations and help from friends and family. We have bought about 20 to 25 laptops, and we keep encouraging parents to buy. The children who are very poor, of course, we tell them that's fine, you can use the laptop in the school. But if we find that there is a parent who can afford it, we encourage them to buy, and they depend entirely on us to set up the softwares and everything like that. So as I said again, Moodle for us is a sociological project and not a technical one. Repeating a couple of things and why we think this is working for us. Moodle has given us a space to fulfill some of the values that we stand for. The access and equity through the virtual learning environment is amazing. The individualized learning. So we have several children who may not eventually be able to cope with a lot of English or pure academics, or even passing class 10. We're looking at individualizing learning, where if a child is interested in learning about mountains, he or she can pursue that path. If somebody is interested in learning more of mathematics, he or she can pursue that path. And Moodle is giving us that space. The peer learning is amazing. I mean, all of this, but I'd like to re-emphasize how this can work in an environment with underprivileged and marginalized children. Collaborative knowledge building, the non-linear interactive learning is something that is really very exciting for us, that you can actually teach children about so many things at the same time. And finally, Moodle is allowing us to bridge the digital divide. So this is, just from a philosophical point of view, the session is more a case study, more sharing some of our ideas from halfway across the world. The developing world is simply not represented in education and technology, in my opinion, and poor children are definitely not. So I'm using this opportunity to push and share some of our ideas. Our site is currently hosted at mybigcampus.in. We've just, as of yesterday, because of the iMood, pushed ourselves to to install 2.9 and upgrade our site. We have a few courses. As I said, we're struggling with courses. What we basically do is, because of the limited laptops and the bandwidth, we have really very, very serious bandwidth issues. We conduct the courses in rotation with a group of children in a classroom, as you saw the photograph earlier, with a facilitator and a projector. The facilitator leads the child through the course using the projector. And if the course has a video or an audio, then that's sort of watched collectively. So the children sort of look up from their screen at the projector, so that we save the bandwidth, and we can't have 25, 20 laptops, accessing the internet at the same time. Everyone gets bumped off. So if there is a video or an audio, children watch it together on the screen, then they get back to their own screen, and we encourage a lot of individual work, like quizzes and reading a page and so on and so forth. The facilitator is then available to help the child with whatever he or she wants to do. We started a couple of courses last year, predominantly English reading, the solar system, things like that. And we found, and this is subjective analysis, but we found that children were really able to absorb the concepts and the ideas far better than if you would just be teaching, because there was so much of repetition, so much of reinforcement, and a lot of individualized work. Please remember that children have no access to digital devices at home other than at school. There is no exposure to English language, again, other than at school. Reading and comprehending English is still a major task. So how we now look at the school is, if we can get children, we get children at 3. So between 3 to 5, of course, it's just kindergarten. Between 5 and 6.5 to 7, if we can ensure that they have a big grasp of English reading, comprehension, and communication, then we want to graduate every child from from 7 years into a Moodle learning environment. So this was our biggest challenge, that will our children actually be able to read and navigate courses themselves? But when we tried it out, we found that children simply love it, and they were able to navigate. Some of the children would say my big compass, because they still have a problem with English, but they were able to navigate their courses. They were able to serve some of them. We have to keep the English simple, which is hard for the people who are developing the courses who are first language English speakers, but we are trying to learn new tools like animation and graphics and so on. Reading, sometimes even the children who are fluent find it difficult, and the facilitator is required. So we're looking at a blended learning environment, not a flipped environment. So that's me sitting there. This is a blended learning classroom. We started off like this. We believe in sitting in a democratic way with each child, doing what he likes. What you see on the screen is a program of G Compre, one very simple one. But we realized that we need to get to a facility. We need to get to a projector. We need to get. Yeah. A lot of people have really liked our seating arrangement. That's a mosaic floor, by the way, just to butt in. And we did the mosaic floor ourselves. It's a sun. We have a butterfly. We have a dolphin. The classrooms are in a farm, so it's a cottage style kind of a classroom. Yeah, thanks. So this is a blended learning classroom, but we moved ahead into a projector based kind of thing. And so just to elaborate a little bit more, we strongly use and try to use only open education resources. We try not to take any proprietary content whatsoever. We are really trying that children and teachers develop local content. So our school is located in a village, so teachers can go out, look at rivers, document the rivers, and put all the images and videos of the river onto our course. We are trying that the content is contextual. So as I said, things like landforms, rivers, politics. We're trying to use the field, which is what is our contribution to developing curriculum. We're trying to use our field and develop content based on our location. However, some of the challenges is that teachers are resistant. We are not comfortable using audios and videos developed in the West, but most of the content that you find on the internet has heavy accents. So we really need to pull up our socks and learn new tools where we can develop our own content. Examples of content development are, we're located in a village, and if a 10-year-old needs to know how the political structure in India works, one of the courses that we could develop, which would be completely generated by us and could be of value to other schools, would be that the children of our school go and interview the head, she's a representative, and actually learn what the village is a participatory unit in India's electoral politics. And then, take her photographs, put images, put the interview. So we are really looking at building content from our end and not using ready-made content. We are trying to follow the spirit of an activity-based learning. we are saying that all the content on the screen in a Moodle needs to have offline and online activities. So as I said, offline activities means going to the village, talking to the head of the village, going and looking or getting out of this classroom and finding things hidden on a farm. So we use a lot of activity-based learning. So how can we develop our Moodle site that is in consonance with our philosophy of an activity-based learning, along with equity, along with motivation, along with pushing the individual learner to build his or her own content and learn from what's there. Yeah. So some of the examples I've given you is, the rivers. Children would love to look at the river on a Google Earth. They would love to, go and find the waste management system in the town nearby and study it. So digital tools combined with independent working, field work, hands-on work is what we are now trying to do and what our vision is for content development. You'll be surprised, but we really work with very little technology, very little bandwidth, and as I said, very few computers. We're constantly looking for donated laptops or new laptops, and we have a speed of only 1 Mbps. Major bandwidth problems. We don't have 3G properly, so we are on a broadband connection provided by the Indian government. So we take more and more phone lines. All the technical work that we do is done by one or two people, one or two of us, and we are constantly looking for volunteers and support. The school runs on a very low budget. We charge fees, but they are very, very minimal, and they are not even enough to cover the fees. So those are some of the challenges for us for creating more servers. If you want to have a big blue button server, for instance, we want to do a Moodle server, we need a lot more resources. Finally, and I'd like to sort of end with this, our vision is that the My Big Campus becomes a school without walls. Moodle and technology today is allowing us to reach out to a limited number of children. We'd like to break the walls of the school figuratively and set up a wireless mesh network in an area of about, say, 15 to 20 kilometers around us, where children from our school would go home and would have routers and laptops or tablets or smartphones at home and would access the Moodle server from their homes in the evenings and when they go home, and would keep learning as they go. Teachers would become available on this network. So basically, we're saying we want to build our own educational local internet for people, because people do not have access to the internet. However, as I said again, the main challenge is not the technology. There are routers and there is lots of stuff available, but the main challenge is actually getting the community to buy into the My Big Campus idea. We have started showing people Raspberry Pis. We are looking at people. A lot of people have televisions in their homes. So we're looking at how we can, get them a Raspberry Pi connected to their television, which works out cheaper, and then eventually get them to invest in a router and have whatever content is available on our school in the Moodle server accessible at home on the network. So that's our final vision, and it's really difficult for me to keep looking at a screen and speak, but I've been able to communicate to some extent what we're doing, and I'd like to sort of open it up to discussion. And I didn't want to speak for half an hour, but it's been half an hour. So if there are any questions, then I'm happy to take, or if I was too fast or if I was not very clear, then please do, some feedback of what you think, and, yeah, something like that. Okay, thanks. Yeah. Yeah, so I'm assuming Susan or would moderate, or she would moderate the audio. We use as many activities. We use the page. We are started using lesson plan. We use the quiz a lot. We use we use URL. We SCORM packages don't apply to us, so we don't use that. We use as I said, page, lesson plan. The quiz, we're finding the quiz particularly empowering. So children just get amazed when there's a screen, and then they can redo the quiz again, and they get the wrong answer, and then you link them somewhere else. So the quiz has worked really well. We're slow, but we're going to crack the lesson plan a little better. the videos and audio, I mean, yeah, the page works, all of it really works, but as I said, the challenge is to get more interactive stuff on, and get the content that is local and contextual rather than just taking off the net. So that's where we are. Yeah. Yes, I think interactive is really hard. Yeah, and as I said, you must understand that it's a limited world, and I'd like to repeat that there are very few people in India who really subscribe to this and who really can help. So you're basically on your own, and probably we could talk more about this, and I could talk to with some colleagues here. So yeah, thanks, Suzanne. Yeah. I'm really looking forward to the rest of the sessions because there's so much that we need to learn and so much that we need to do. And we keep thinking that we're running behind, that we're running and we're running and we aren't able to catch up. So we want to start things like Scratch. We want to do some Python stuff. And what actually ends up happening is that you have to learn everything yourself, and that's the hard bit. And then so the teachers are applications people. Like if you teach them, they're able to get it, but they can't come up with it on their own. As I said, they have themselves seen the internet or a laptop before they came to our school. So yeah, so the next project would be to get 8 and 10-year-olds to do some programming. I think tribal children, yeah. Yeah, really. I hope so soon too, Chris. Thanks a lot. Yeah. And I think children are ready. So what we find is that children really learn fast. And if you don't, you feel like you owe it to them, because underprivileged children are just so grateful for whatever that you do, that you feel very inspired and motivated to keep learning more. And yes, I mean, I was not a technology person before I came into the school and before I set up the school, and we've come a long way. But I mean, there's a lot there's a lot more to go. So yeah. Yeah, thanks, Vinny, for giving me this opportunity, really. And I was very nervous, and with all the big blue button problems, but really thank you. And the fact that we will be documented and available, it really helps us to, in some ways, share what we're doing with the rest of the world. And I'd like to really thank you for allowing us to, accepting our presentation immediately. And I'm going to participate wholeheartedly in the rest of the sessions for the rest of the day. Yeah, I'd really like to keep in touch with all of you, and yeah, sure, Chris, and I would like to invite any and all of you to India. If by any chance there is a way you'd like to come and you would like to do some work for us, you're most welcome. As I said, the place is very beautiful. We live on a farm. The community is lovely, and they're more than deserving of your services. So if ever you would like to come or develop a course. The other thing we're doing, which again I'd like to say and share, is that we're looking for people all over the world, anybody, young students, young people with a passion for anything, to develop courses for us on Moodle, sitting where they are. We'd give them an outline and things, but we'd really like them to develop courses. So we're looking for course creators, and I hope I've motivated some of you to try out a course for us, or to come online on VBB with some of our kids and just share. I mean, kids would love to hear about Australia. They'd love to hear about the kiwi fruit or about koala bears, anything like that. Just to come and talk to them without something like that. So we're really looking at that. People coming in and speaking to them once a month. Yeah, thanks, Chris. So I'm going to take you up on that. And we've been trying to do that locally in India as well. We're located in a pretty remote, so you can't expect people to come and join us physically. That's the other reason we're on Moodle. But yeah, sure. So great. If there are any more questions, otherwise maybe we can end. I'm not sure. So. But thanks a lot to Vinny and Stefan for helping me, and Gareth too. I don't know, he's not around, but please thank him for putting on, and all the team at iMoot. You guys are really doing a good job, and everything was very well and organized. And I'm glad that the village internet has supported me to continue this much. I thought I might get bumped off in the middle, but great. Thanks. Yeah, thank you.
Well, Well, thanks again, Michelle. That was just a wonderful presentation. Really appreciate that, and I'm sure you'll get some people interested in helping you out somewhere along the line. So thanks again for your time, and it was a terrific presentation. So thanks a lot, Michelle.
Thanks. Okay. Yeah. Thanks. Okay. Goodbye and good day, and look forward to seeing you in the rest of the sessions.